Welcome everyone. Thanks very much for taking time out of your day to join us on this latest AMA. The AMA predominantly will be covering Link protocol updates and sort of a bit more in-depth detail, which Logan will take everyone through. And then on the back end of that, we'll go over recent stuff that I've managed to pluck from the timeline with regards to sort of news and the current climate direction. And then we'll open up the floor to everyone for any questions and then close it out from there. Could be half an hour, could be an hour, depending on how we get on. But so without further ado, for those of you who aren't aware, we're developing LinqProtocol. It's a decentralized marketplace for CPU and GPU compute, and as the CEO, but also in charge of the development team, and they are sort of planning towards our first release. So on that segue, Logan, I will over to you for a LinqProtocol update.
So I think a good place to start always with these is for people who aren't aware or aren't caught up. We've been working for the last going on 8 months now on developing actively LinqProtocol, and what LinqProtocol is it's a decentralized compute marketplace, as George said. Now, what is that? And I think, especially for new people, it can be a bit abstract, it can be a bit hard to understand, what's valuable about a decentralized compute marketplace. So in short, right now, everything on the web, all servers, all websites, all AI models, all cool rendered images, they all run on a server of some type. These servers largely are centralized right now by 3 major players: Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. And, most of the compute power in the world sits there. Now, one of the big challenges with this is that obviously that's centralized. There's privacy concerns. There are point of failure concerns. And also, there's this increasing push to control that kind of layer of the web, right? So if you try and buy a decent amount of compute power, there's large chunks of KYC involved. And not only that, it's incredibly expensive. And so it's oftentimes bars smaller players from joining the kind of compute race or playing with AI tools or renting GPUs and etc. So we're building a decentralized compute marketplace where we allow everyone to turn their idle compute power into active nodes in the network that other people can use. So kind of a 2-pronged solution, right? On the one side, you solve the kind of centralized internet problem. On the other side, a lot of people have a ton of compute power just lying around. Laptops, computers, etc. that just, kind of gather dust at home. In addition to that, there's also this huge push right now for home labs. So these are big compute workstations that people acquire themselves to do training on, largely for AI right now, or maybe it's crypto mining. But the point is, people are amassing a lot of compute power, and the truth of it is that most of that compute power for most of its life will just sit idle and not do anything. And so LinqProtocol brings together kind of the solution for people who sit on a lot of idle compute power, be they data centers or individual consumers, and it merges that with a solution to the kind of very controlled and closed off internet landscape where compute power is very centralized and is getting more and more regulated over time. And so that's what we're building, and that's what we've been working on. It's a huge project, definitely a colossal undertaking, especially for a project our size, but we think that's where a lot of the value lies in that owning this type of technological infrastructure really puts us into a different league in terms of, where we sit in the technical level, what we can compete with. I've mentioned in the Telegram group chat a couple of times some of the other projects in this space that work toward this. And, for us, it's largely been the last 8 months have been, getting all the kind of building blocks in place for us to take on this next step. And so, that's kind of where the update comes in. Where are we going? Where is progress? When? And I think right now we've made really good progress. I'm really happy with where the tool is. Every day it's growing a little bit, but I think this week marks a special kind of milestone in our roadmap, which is that internally we have a version where all the major functions are completed. Everything kind of works from one single UI. You can deploy servers, you can use our templates, the blockchain is working. I'll get into a bit of the changes or what's happening with the blockchain components soon, but essentially that's where we're at right now. Between this and a public launch, it's polishing, it's bug fixing, it's just testing, making sure that it hits that kind of quality standard that we've always looked for, and then we'll release our first kind of version of LinqProtocol with all major features.
So all I would say is, as with a lot of the crypto space, there are some sort of more technical facets to it. So I do know that as much as people are aware of what we are doing, there is still an element of uncertainty as to what would it mean for me? Can I use it? What can we do with it? Give me some sort of analogy, sort of what people could do, what people could host, what people would use it for. So I would just say it's probably worth, again, just going over maybe sort of a couple of examples, whether it be sort of, just basic CPU server rental, or, or some form of AI training. But maybe if you can give maybe like one or two different sort of scenarios where people here could potentially, or even businesses could potentially use our service over the existing service, and what their existing service would look like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think, again, the big kind of chunks where utility lies is in the internet, right? Like, this is the backbone of the internet. So anything that needs compute is kind of our hotspot. So for instance, if you want to work with perhaps say a DeFi platform, you could host their whole stack, their servers, their front end, any kind of contract indexer that they have running. You could host all of their things needed to provide that service, but you can host it on a decentralized network, which means no government oversight, no involvement by any third party. No one can turn it off, right? That's what we're working towards. And so, hosting websites is probably the most tangible example, but definitely not the most lucrative. The most lucrative example is definitely GPUs. This is where a lot of the money is moving, just because of how much it costs to rent GPUs. People don't have a good concept in their minds of how expensive GPU rental gets, but you can pay well over $20,000 for a single H100 card, and that wouldn't be enough to run even 8 instances of a large LLM. And so when you're actually trying to do work with AI and you're trying to build your own custom solutions and not use, APIs from OpenAI or Anthropic or so on and so forth, and you want to build your own custom solution, maybe you want to do some custom training, fine tuning on smaller models for specific use cases. For any of these things, you need a GPU, and you're going to pay through your teeth going to one of the centralized providers. And what we're trying to make it easy for people to do is access GPUs where there isn't necessarily that kind of enterprise interest, home-based RTX 5090s, etc. That can be a lot cheaper, a lot more accessible. That's kind of on the one side. I think, always there's so many advantages of doing it this way that's sometimes hard to grab it in a one-liner. But even on the enterprise side, right, so many people build, again, covering specifically with GPU, so many people are investing a lot of money into building the GPU infrastructure. The thinking will go something like, AI is going to be the next big thing. For AI, you need a lot of compute power, and so what should I buy? I should buy compute power. And a lot of people don't know, or don't have experience running server farms or know the challenges involved with that. And so what they do is they invest in this compute power, and then at the end of the day, it doesn't really have a job to do apart from their own mission with it, which oftentimes wouldn't consume a lot of that compute power relative to a 5-year cycle. Again, there's an enterprise version or an enterprise option for renting GPU power at a market competition rate from independent third parties that don't have an outlet to market their own GPUs or their own GPU sales on. So again, tangible examples is really anything that you interact with that uses the internet. AI, graphics rendering, website hosting, even things like hosting crypto miners can be done on LinqProtocol. It's a very open, very general compute platform, and we've done a lot of work to make sure that you can do almost anything on it. Fundamentally, it is compute power, and it's a decentralized marketplace for exchanging compute power between different parties. But I think that's it, should be considered when you're considering the scope or what we can do with this. Anything that runs on the internet could run on LinqProtocol at a cheaper price and much less centralized gateways.
Yeah, I think you forget that every time from a user's perspective, when it comes to hosting a domain, you buy it on Google domains, and you host it directly with Google, and all of that sort of stuff is done in the background. You're just not aware of it. You're not aware of the mass amount of money that moves on. But that's like you said, that's mainly like a CPU level. But once you start doing anything of any sort of power on the internet, I've been on the AWS systems. I mean, we were using, I think, what was our bill at the highest amount? Something like $1,200
just
a month.
Not for any AI stuff, just for hosting just our basic websites, right? Link Hub, all of our apps at the landing page, all of that was coming up to $2,000 a month in terms of server costs and bandwidth and throughput. We've moved all of our stuff officially is running on LinqProtocol on an internal server running that stack, and our cost is just shy $200 now a month, and so that's a huge cost savings.
Yeah, and 25 grand a year is a lot of money to spend on something that you can, but there's no other alternative at the moment. You move across to Google, they all have a similar pricing scheme, because much like a monopoly exists, you have only that option at the moment. So I think that's probably for a small company our size, that's the cost. If you imagine, the cost of a larger a company's going to be spending probably tens of thousands a month on that level of compute. And that's, like you said, not even going to sort of, renting GPUs and stuff like that. So,
oh yeah, that would start like hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. Always put it in an analogy so people can understand sort of the scope of the industry. So when people are throwing figures around saying that, the compute industry is worth trillions, it's so easy to do, and it's done all the time in crypto, just to ham up numbers to try and drum up some form of hype. I think it's really important to sort of explain where these numbers come from, so you can imagine just one company doing a very minimal amount of compute power on the internet. That's what it costs to do. So you can start to imagine these costs sort of expanding exponentially across the world. So yeah, it is a very exciting time.
Something I'd add to that, right, is like also fundamentally when you need to consider when you're asking what's the utility of LinqProtocol, the protocol itself has its own, like maybe our average listener here isn't going to ever need to run a server. But, there is a token, there's the LNQ token. And what does the LNQ token do? What does it do for you? What's its purpose? What is the value equivalency of the LNQ token? And for us, what we'd love that to be with LinqProtocol is that there's some kind of relation between how much compute you can do on a network and the LNQ token, meaning that the more LNQ you own, the more fraction of the compute power on the network you can own. And so fundamentally that ties LNQ to this kind of measurable value. And so when you're interested in what's the purpose of the token, what's the utility, what you really care about there is, how many people are going to use it. So the question is, how can we drum up more volume going through the LNQ token by changing people's hands because they're trying to use the token, they're trying to consume it. Much like with ETH, you consume ETH even if you're not a ETH holder. To interact with the chain, you need to hold ETH, right? That gives ETH some kind of fundamental value. The more people who want to use the network, the more the value of ETH is there because people have to purchase it to interact with the network. I want to see a similar dynamic for LNQ with compute power. And I think that's what makes LinqProtocol so powerful from a decentralized token perspective, is that it will allow you to have so much wider reach, so much wider utility. And, again, does it really matter if you grasp fundamentally all the cool things you can do with LinqProtocol? Not really. But what you can grasp is we've added 100 providers this month. Our month-over-month usage for server instances has gone up 4x. What that would mean in a traditional space is, okay, the company is making money. What it would mean in our case with LNQ is that the token is accruing value, purely by how many people are using it. The function also of the LNQ token goes from being something that you can hold on and speculate over and interact with on LinkHub and use on the different apps that we offer and enter certain tiers to okay, well, this token right here can actually host a server. It is the equivalent to someone trying to pay for their own server hosting costs. I'm really excited about all of the opportunities that it makes for the token, us making this move to decentralized compute.
Yeah, 100%. It's probably worth noting also that the way our tokenomics is set up is very different to ETH having the ability to mint and sort of to control supply and demand. Obviously, we are much simpler in a lot of ways because it's just a finite supply. So you will have that element of burn will exist and should, obviously there'll be a lesser effect than obviously Ethereum is huge and the amount of transactions or interacting with is much larger. But the concept is that with a finite amount there, there is that perceived ability for it to sort of the curve to be a little bit more aggressive depending on what adoption levels as well. So yeah, it's very interesting. I can go on.
To add to that part about tokenomics, also inflation is a cool thing with LinqProtocol. So this won't be something that we'll be releasing with the kind of initial dashboard and the initial server support. This is something that we're working toward in the coming months, and that would be controlled supply. So being able to ensure that the kind of curve of LNQ supply over time is not radical at all, meaning inflation is directly tied to how many people join the network. So you can't have runaway inflation without having also runaway adoption, which kind of offset each other. So I think that's also a really cool part about the kind of future utility that can bring to LNQ token.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned before on many occasions, if you have a look at the tokenomics white paper, it is quite heavy, but there's a lot of thought, a lot of time, and we've got a lot of our outside experience being put into this to ensure that it all works seamlessly and it's all tied in nicely to allow that sort of ecosystem to be healthy and to sort of to grow as it should do, expand. So yeah, really excited. It's it's been a long time coming. When you plan these things and it's sort of like, when I was chatting to you, Logan, saying, how long will this take? How long will this take? And you're like, well, that's probably gonna be like 6 months plus. It's like, oh my God, 6 months plus. It's sort of trying to sort of fathom that length of time in your head in the crypto space is like decades.
Yeah, crazy.
So yeah, but I'm glad we took time. We didn't rush it. There wasn't sort of a hype thing that we just shoved out the door. And I think you guys, once you see it and you can touch it, even the first iteration of it, it will start to make more sense. And then it'll be much easier to then envisage these additional bolt-on modules that will include the GPU and other factors, because there will be, there'll be something. It'll be a lot easier to get your head around. I'm not saying that you haven't, but that's really, really exciting.
Also, just while we're here talking about thinking about things in advance and planning for the future and how hard that can be, especially on longer time frames in an industry that moves lightning fast. Something I'm excited about with LinqProtocol is that the general AI space has definitely, how can I say, eased at least people's expectations of what's coming, and the general hype around AI and the amount of eyes that kind of keyword alone is bringing, that's dropping off, and it has been dropping off for a while as people get more used to this in their kind of day-to-day life, and it just becomes less exciting as more people have been introduced to it. The impact of a fading narrative on a crypto project can be pretty intense, and so having decentralized compute as something that we planned for in advance, that we kind of felt that it was coming, having something that can interest people that are not just here because they heard about AI, that's a really big part of our strategy also. Having something that's more fundamental, that can attract more people with core decentralization principles, that care about privacy, that care about government overreach. This is really exciting to us because it allows us a lot more flexibility and a lot more appeal to a much wider group of people, especially in a space of dwindling and changing narratives all the time.
Yeah, it's also important to mention that this is why we all came to this space, because the decentralized nature of it, the fact that it couldn't be manipulated, it couldn't be controlled, and this feeds back into that narrative, that sort of privacy narrative, the whole ability to create something that people can use fairly, and that there isn't, because we can pretend that AWS and Google don't have monopolies in the tech space. They do. Like, if you want something done, you're either pretty much a Google user, like we are. We ecosystem runs on Google or Microsoft, or you'll run on other systems. So it is frustrating, and there aren't huge amounts of trusted alternatives. So I think this is a genuinely useful addition to the tech space in that decentralized bracket. And I firmly believe that the whole Web3 space, it's sort of growing pains, and who would have guessed the direction it went in was the technology made it easier to launch a token, which basically introduced a load of complete degenerates, like different level attention-seeking degenerates, which then has caused a lot of sort of people to sort of lose out decent sums of money. But I do believe that it will always come back to that core value when all the fanfare from all the dross sides. People will come back in and they will go back to that sort of default setting, which is, I'm going to go and look for a project that's working hard. They've got a docs team. The token is out there. I can understand it. It's been audited. I'm comfortable. They've been here for a specific amount of time. And there are loads of tokens like that. But I would be way more comfortable seeing tokens who bring something to the space, like some of our partners actually do something with their projects, than just sort of the endless flop that is thrown in space. Because what it does is it damages it with the view to government, with the view to sort of legislation and people's perception of crypto, what it is, banks. This last half of the cycle has definitely been a step sort of half a step backwards with regards to sort of how the world perceives crypto with regards to scams and sort of money launderers and all that sort of side of things. So I think it's still a very, very immature industry, and I think we've got a long way to go. And I think this platform, like you said, Logan, allows us to build what is a platform. We're creating a platform which can lead into its own blockchain, its own L1. It's not a case of just trying to sort of balance narratives between AI and RWA and other sort of things just to try and keep people interested in you. We've almost pulled ourselves back from that to sort of build something that we think you guys will see the added value. It's a bugbear, and I see it every day on Twitter. It's just to try and hold my tongue, bite my tongue, not say anything. It's very, very hard to do. But yeah,
and I think like as you said, just to clarify, I think the actual utility that LinqProtocol can serve, not just kind of throw away, I mean, how many blockchains are there? There's a ton. I don't know what most of them do. And I'm sure that there are some very good justifications for blockchains existing. But, this isn't something that we spend a lot of time trying to figure out where can we decentralize ourselves more? Where can we get more LNQ into more of, as you called it, a platform versus just kind of a single use token? And decentralized compute, time and time again, just feels like the place where there's a lot of value to add to the system that isn't vaporware, that could actually drive big companies, that could actually give opportunities to people who are less fortunate, who need cheaper compute, that can actually create a very, very censorship resistant kind of pseudo internet. And I think these are exciting things that we want to have exist in the world, but that also make a lot of sense to have a token for. And I think these are great reasons to care about LinqProtocol.
It's probably worth noting at that point, some of you may have seen the news from Google that bought 5.4% in Cypher mining, and everyone was like, Bitcoin mining, amazing, it's awesome, for the bullish. But actually, if you dig down a little bit further, the reason Google bought into that was as part of the $3 billion deal with FluidStack. And it's all about betting on AI growth with surging demand. So there is, there's not enough compute power on the planet that they can access at the moment to do what they need to do. They need trillions of dollars. I think Sam Altman, people taking the mick out of him begging for $7 trillion worth, to cure cancer or something through AI. But the point is that there is already huge amounts of compute power that we discussed on the planet that this is not accessible because it's not held by one of these large, data sets. So yeah, huge. It's going to be a huge sort of task to be able to and challenge to be able to sort of open up that compute. But I really think, starting where we're starting is a really good place to sort of give people to, enable people to sort of contribute to that network as well, which is all part of that whole sort of decentralized, community-based project stuff that we're working towards. So yeah, very, very excited about that. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there because it's probably quite poignant at this stage.
I was going to say, almost like a double-sided point on one side. It's don't believe all the headlines you see because that's probably not what's happening. On the other side, everyone wants to buy more compute, and this trend's just going to keep going. And just as you were saying that, maybe some way to think about it is that if you imagine there's three big central parties and they're all buying up a bunch of GPUs and server components, and they want to build these huge data centers. At the same time, there is some bleed out to either third party or consumer markets where they get some much smaller fraction, but still a meaningful fraction of all the GPU power in the world. And the problem that they have is that because they're not all connected in some way, because there isn't a marketplace that joins them all together, they don't have distribution. They can't get out there if they tried, because how are you going to sell privately kind of your 4 or 5 5090s that sit in your home lab to the greater internet out there? You just don't really have that option. And I think that's kind of it excites me to be able to do that, to just turn servers into this online accessible, or turn gaming PCs, for instance, into an online accessible server that anyone can just deploy anything on. So yeah, it's almost like an aggregator for all the compute that Microsoft, Amazon, and Google don't control.
That's another analogy. Airbnb, right? It's the same analogy, but with property. I have 3 holiday homes, and I don't, but I have 3 holiday homes. I can't speak to the Hilton Group and ask them if I can wrap them into their sort of user program or whatever. You just can't do that. So the only way to compete was that. The same with Uber, same with Booking. People have made obscene amounts of money being able to connect the dots globally from aggregators. And not only did we solve a problem that actually exists at the moment, which is this accessing more compute, but also, lowering the barrier to entry for small startups as well. There is that element of what we're doing. So yeah, super, super excited.
Also, it's not a trivial, for instance, imagine Uber, right? There's the trivial problem, which is the logistical problem, which is how can I physically get all of these taxi drivers to kind of drive for me, and how can I organize rides for them? But to solve that kind of logistical problem, deep technological solutions had to be invented, right? And so there's also this layer above and beyond just saying we want to aggregate all the GPUs that these companies don't have access to, and then how do you do that? It's not so simple to turn your computer into a server. It's even less simple to make that an accessible task for someone who doesn't know anything about a server, right? And kind of allow them to still make money with that by selling their compute power without them needing to know anything technical. And so just to clarify, there's this huge layer of on-chain problems via our smart contracts that we solve, of real DevOps problems via the LinqProtocol installer that we solve, of networking problems via our own tunneling solution that we solve. Each of these were like really hard problems to wrap our heads around and to solve, and they're all done kind of as the building blocks of this logistical problem, which is how can we possibly connect like all the GPUs and make that like a good experience that people would actually want to use. And I keep saying GPUs as a proxy for computers, but I think computer is a better word, because it's not just about your GPU. It's about, can you run someone's server? Can you host their website? And yeah, I think I've spent too much time here probably, but I think just really getting that message across that there's been non-trivial problems at the technological layer that we had to first build out and solve to even be in a position to try and solve that logistical problem.
Well, yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. It's taken, like you said, 8 months, but more like 11. Your memory, sir, is fading slightly because it's
my memory.
Like
well, it's just too many lines of code in my head right now. That's really the problem.
So yeah, and I think it just, I really do think that everyone needs to put their head out of the sand and stop trying to chase these sort of wild fantasy dreams. At the moment, I'm seeing it all over my timeline. Go back to researching projects, researching whether you think this is a decent company, whether the people behind the company have the expertise and the knowledge to do what they're doing and their track record and all these other things. Like I was flicking through X and I found a post that was just someone had done the research. $3.9 billion of tokens will be unlocked from, I think it's 12 companies. But I guarantee you 99% of the people that have these tokens will have no idea that there's any form of airdrop or any form of token unlocks being released. We were very open, very transparent from the start. We wanted to give everyone, push the information to people, not just sort of go out there, push the information. This is what we're doing. This is our plan. This is how we aim to do it. Do the research, interrogate it. Like I think Asta have 4% unlocked, Pump Fund is 1%, Zora have 10%. And there's some other ones, even Arbitrum and stuff have unlocked, even 1 or 2%. But, they're gone. It seems like they want those questions so they could plan, some form of strategy from investment around it, as opposed to, I like that color. That's a cool logo. I'm going to buy that. Or some KOL that I follow happens to, like the same thing I like, he said buy that, so I'm going to buy that. It really sort of, I think it would really eliminate a lot of the people who just walk blindly, like weed. Are you seeing that it's pumping at the moment? It literally says if you go to Dex screen on weed, it says in a red taper bar beneath the logo, this token is mintable. Like if you don't know what that is and you walk into that, like you deserve, that's a bit harsh. There is a high possibility that you are going to be executed in the short term for something. Right?
Yep.
Like all these tools have been made, and I remember it was all sort of 2022, 2020. 2024, it was all sort of about that, using AI to try and using all these sorts of processes and tools to try and give people a better understanding, to protect them. And it's like lambs to slaughter. It's like you could use this tool or ape into this coin. Look, it's a dog with a hat. Like, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
It's just, I watch it and it seems like no one's learning their lesson. So yeah, it's frustrating. So I think it's just all I would say is just a little bit of time in to do the research, because there are some great projects out there that probably warrant your attention, and you could potentially make a good return on them. But it's more about putting your money somewhere where you wake up in the morning and you're not worried about being rugged, like having your money genuinely stolen. I would just say, yeah, that I think people are way too fickle with it, and too easy to blame you. But yeah, so and also I say at the moment, my last thing before I get the box in is there are a lot of cheap games going on. I've seen a lot of projects, or a lot of people they're trying to steer people by posting photos and basically being cute with phraseology. Be realistic, okay? All I'm saying is when you do your research, what is realistically the case? Okay, does this sound too good to be true? It probably is too good to be true. Just be coy, ask the difficult questions in the Telegram, ask the difficult questions in Discord or on X, whatever it happens to be. Be more inquisitive, be more skeptical. Like in 2021, I remember it was savage. Like the owners and project leaders had to answer so many difficult questions from intellectually based community members. So I would just encourage that. I would say, guys, be super skeptical. Like, now is the time where people fumble stuff, but ask the difficult questions. We've always welcomed it, and we continue to welcome it. So just please keep doing that.
I was going to say, like, the meta keeps changing, right? Which is kind of the point that you're making, and people keep chasing this new meta, right? Like, a good example is the kind of like listing on an exchange. That was really cool 9 months ago, and then recently it's like delisting from an exchange would have probably got your project cancelled 3 months ago, and now it's cool. These things change a lot, and then the thing that I think we're really focused on is that we're going to build something core that has core utility, that people find value in, that people would be like really sad about if it went away. And unfortunately, that's not a meta. That never changes. Kind of the money tends always to rotate back to people who are actually building that value, and that's what we're really committed to do. Especially LinqProtocol should be a showcase of that.
100%. And I'll just touch on the liquidity situation. This will be recorded now. So the way it works when you list on an exchange. So obviously, let's go back actually. When you list on a decentralized exchange, you put X amount of tokens with X amounts of Ethereum or whatever chain you happen to be on, or their native token. You pair them together, you have a big bag of money. People can sell into it or buy from it. Simple as that. It is exactly the same concept with centralized exchanges. So when I hear people saying, Binance are dumping this and whatever, they're dumping that, and so, the market makers are the exchanges are keeping our token price down. That's absolute dross. So how it works is when you list on an exchange, you do the same thing. But let's say exchange A that we want to list on, not only do they charge you a wicked amount of money, you get to then give them some of USDT, because your pair will be USDT. It's not Ethereum, because that's the way they work it on most exchanges. So you'll give X amount of your token, X amount of USDT. That will be, you provide the liquidity to that exchange, and they do this. You can then get a market maker to balance between your decks. And let's say you've got 4 or 5 exchanges. All this means is you have 5 or 6 pots of money. So if you delist from those exchanges, you then have a fifth of the liquidity that you have. What does that mean? Because, you've removed some of those pots of money, but the project provides those pots of money. The exchange don't buy your token. You're not that good. They don't buy your token. They expect you to give them unless you are that good, or you are like hot shit, or a meme coin that's just gone through the roof. Then they might try and buy. But you normally, as a project, give the money. So every time there's an exchange, it's a lot of capital that you're providing, right? However, if you've got 5 exchanges and a decentralized exchange, and you remove all of your exchanges, you then have a sixth of your liquidity pool. What does that mean? Well, it means if I buy back tokens as a project, because my price is, I think this is a good level where I can buy my digital stock, I can move the price further, because I haven't got to move 6 lines of liquidity. I only need to move 1. And that is one good thing about having just on a decentralized exchange. It's clearer, it's crisp, and it's, all the liquidity is forced into one channel. But it doesn't mean you've got more liquidity, because all those pots that have to be balanced across all the 6 units are now just 1, which means you'll go up faster and you'll come down faster. It's that simple. It's that simple, guys. When we list on an exchange, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars just to list as a privilege, and then you're talking about another $400,000 probably worth of liquidity that then is balanced. So when you buy and sell on BitGet or Bitmart, or BingX, then our market makers are making sure that one price doesn't go up 25% and the others are sat at the bottom, and then arbitrage comes in. It's a very complex thing, but know that the projects are responsible, especially at our level, for providing liquidity. So yeah, I'm not saying it's good or bad to delist. A lot less managerial stress, I can tell you that, but it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It just means that, it's a different viewpoint to that. Will it become a meta? Maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, I know some people won't trade on decentralized exchanges because they're worried about MEV bots, sandwich bots, and they'll just trade on their crypto exchange because, they've got to worry about losing their wallet number. There is some form of customer support, and, it's not your keys, not your crypto, but some people just don't care. And money also that they're maybe, a couple of $1,000, they're comfortable holding that on a reputable exchange. So that's my only little bit. I probably have to mention it again about liquidity and exchanges, that it can work in your favor and it can work against you, much like not having them. So you be the decider of whether you think it's good. I personally think it's a great thing because it gets your name out there and it gives other people options from around the world. Some people, use that exchange and they can use that exchange. Some people just don't like using Uniswap, stuff like that. So you decide, guys, but we will be for the long term, we'll be holding on with our partnerships with our exchanges. We think it allows us to be able to sort of cover a wider area, and that's important for us. We've factored in the financial, requirements for us to have to apply the tokens to those exchanges to provide liquidity for everyone to have a fair playing field.
It's just like when money enters the space again, like a lot more people have a lot more access to purchasing tokens on exchanges easier, and so like time will tell, I guess. But I think as for us, also it was a big investment from the project, right? It's not something I think we step back on. I think that was it has a lot of good potential outcomes, and the point you were ultimately trying to make, right, is that like no one's dumping on you. That's just kind of this arbitrage and this balancing act that you have to do between the exchanges. Is what you need to do when you have this many exchanges listed. And I think a lot of projects and also that liquidity, unlike the DEX, doesn't just, either it comes out of the DEX or you supply it, right? Like either someone's selling into some DEX arbitrage or they're selling into your, as the project's USDT. And so I can see why it's taxing on some projects, especially if they have huge amounts of volume on these exchanges. But anyway, I think you covered it very well. The differences, the pros, the cons. I guess there's a case to be made, but yeah, I mean, as for us, it was a good decision, I think.
Yeah, 100%. So I've covered mainly of those sort of points I wanted to cover, Logan. Like I said, it's a difficult time for everyone. It's a retrace of manic, fortunately we're well aware of that. We're just very much looking forward to putting out the product out the door so you guys can see what you've been so patient waiting for us to deliver. I have no doubt that you'll start to see the bigger picture from this, especially as it moves on with time. So yeah, it's great. With the rant aside, the frustration and rant aside, we're incredibly excited, incredibly happy, and we can't wait to put this out the door and to put, and then put the marketing behind it as well. So yeah, it's all geared up, ready to go.
Yeah, and I'll add, right, because I'm really hoping that we start attracting more people that are developers or are nearby developers, and you have an interest in compute and you find like decentralized private things interesting. If you are in the audience right now and you're listening to this and like that even sounds mildly interesting, please engage with us on TG. Like I'd love to see more real prodding questions into LinqProtocol. We get surface level stuff all the time, just trying to reaffirm that like, does it exist? Is it real? Is it coming? But I'd like to hear more critique. We put out a lot of content, especially in the light papers about this. We've showcased a lot of what's functioning in the videos. And so if you're a dev and you're interested, reach out and if you have any questions, please engage with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'd also love to start building out a list of some early testers to try running community providing nodes or community provider nodes. And so if that sounds like you, please hit us up in the TG. It would be great to talk to you.
Amazing. Logan, I will let you sign off. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Logan.
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much for taking time, guys. I know it's a tragic space right now, but last message I'll leave you with is that we're really committed to building something that we think is going to be game changing, and that's not going to change anytime ever. So hope you guys have a good time in the trenches, and we'll catch you in the next one.